All right, so let's see. Okay, recap. I wasn't here on Friday. So you guys talked about GitHub, pull requests, stuff like that. And I believe you had follow-up assignment, or you should have, or I don't know what was said. But let's see. Again, we kind of do this as we go, but we're kind of flushing this out. But so I encouraged you to make sure you update here. You could create a pull request to get a link here. Looks like we are doing pretty good here. Okay. It also encouraged you, I don't know, depending on which lab you belong to, for those of you that work with me or Dr. Worthman or Dr. Nelson, it encouraged you to clone this website, or at least create a pull request. We kind of have a page with everybody in the lab, which we shamelessly stole this from Dr. Lundgren, so I know he has the same thing. So yeah, I encourage you to create a pull request, get your picture up here. It's kind of nice that we can kind of it helps everyone get to know who everyone is. And it's also just nice for our lab for other people around the world to see a little bit about what we look like, which is kind of nice. So, okay, any general questions before we jump into new stuff today? Crickets, quiet. Yeah.
Have you created a pull request for that today?
For that one, that's a good question. So that one lives, let's see, does this link work? CCL. Okay, that one goes to the website. Okay, well, it is, this is the repo. If you, I don't know, write it down or something. So the net lab lives somewhere else. And I think Dr. Mangelson's lab, I don't think it's set up this way. I think it's through the BYU website system. So, but you can create a pull request here, just like the bootcamp website. So, any other questions? Okay. All right, well, let's see. Let's get started. So we are talking about VS Code here. So maybe this will be a bit shorter, maybe not, I don't know. So let's see. So I think on the website, it talks about how to install it in Linux. I'm going to assume you have it installed. And we're going to go through a bunch of things. You may ask why we are sitting here having a meeting about an editor, which is a pretty valid question. So one reason is that VS Code is just becoming the editor of choice. I'm not saying it's perfect or better than every others. I like it the best, but I think it's used by over 50%. By far, I mean, it didn't even exist, whatever, 5 or 6 years ago, and now it's by far the most commonly used editor. Okay, so it is an editor. People often ask me, well, how is it different than Visual Studio? Visual Studio is an IDE. It has a compiler built in. It's designed to compile code with Microsoft's compiler. VS Code doesn't have a compiler, but it can hook into different things that you install in your system and use them and things like that. So yeah, it's an editor, but it's kind of a pretty fancy editor. So, okay, so I'm going to take you through kind of a lot of the stuff I've learned. If other people want to share things or stop me or say, hey, that's a dumb way to do it, here's a better way, that's totally fine. I like learning new things along the way too. So, Okay, so the first thing you should know is that is how to open stuff. So it's pretty self-explanatory, file open, okay? But what I always do, and always, is I go file open folder, okay? And I generally open some Git repository that I'm working on, okay? Because it ties in nice and things like that. So also when you open a folder, which I have here, you get to see, when you click this tab at the top, you get to see all the file structure here. And like when we talked about Git, you can kind of see the status of things I've changed and stuff like that, which is really nice. But also what's important is that I have this .vs code folder, and in here I have different configurations for this this repository, okay? And so I have different settings and things, and we'll go into that, but you have to open the folder view. You have to kind of open the folder to get all those smart hooks into your code, okay? I mean, other fancy stuff's gonna happen behind the scenes that you don't even realize, like the fact that, I mean, when I open it in this view, depending on what extensions you have, like I think it could be looking in my CMake files, it could be looking in my make files, it looks at all my source code and it parses all of it and kind of builds all the information about my C code, and all that's happening. That doesn't really happen if you just open individual files. So I encourage you to always open the folder. So the way I do that generally is if I'm gonna do most of my stuff here in the ECN 330 student repo, okay? So often you can open VS Code by just typing code, but I'll often go and open a directory like this, okay? And I already have it open, so it's smart. It just goes to the one I have open already, okay? So there's also workspaces, and workspaces are a little bit different in that I haven't had the need to use this, but you could have like collections of multiple folders that you have open at the same time, and that's what it calls a workspace. And there's some file it saves somewhere to remember that, but I don't know what it is. Okay. So also you should know, once you've opened, if I close VS Code here and reopen it, it's just going to reopen the last, I'm just going to call this a workspace. It's going to reopen this last folder / workspace that I have, okay? And you can go file, let's see, where is it? Open recent, and you can see some of the recent ones I've had open. And if you hit more, it's Control R, okay? So I rarely go into that menu. I often just go to a window and hit Control, oops. You can't be down in the terminal, you have to be somewhere else. I hit Control R and I forgot to record, so I'm good. Oh, I didn't forget, I am recording, okay. And these are kind of all the different folders I've had open in the past. So for example, I open like a student repository and I have, oh, I'm sorry, it's a little small up there. Now let's make this bigger. Precise. Okay, so you can kind of just search in all my stuff I've had. So this is often what I do when I want to work on like a course or something. I go, oh, let me open the student repository for 625 or 427 or 330 or something. And I'll show you in a minute, you can actually work remotely on different machines. So these are actually on different machines, different OSs on the same machine even here. So, and please, it's nice if this is interactive, so just stop me with questions and things as we go. Okay, so that's my usual. I kind of pop open the window and I hit Control R and I try to remember, oh, I'm working on 330 stuff, and I go open the appropriate thing, okay? Once I'm in here and I want to open a file, sometimes I go looking for it, but often I don't, okay? Often I just use the Control P shortcut. Okay, and so if I know I want to open, yeah, like display.h, okay, then you'll see it finds all of them, and up at the top it says, hey, you've opened this one recently, so this is probably the one you're after. Okay, so sometimes I go in here and I click a file to open, but very often I just, if I know I'm after some obscure C file somewhere, I'll go and find it. And sometimes there may be lots of matches, right? I've got main.c and lots of different folders here. Okay.
That shortcut key was Control P?
Yeah, Control P. So ignore, I know you think that's for printing stuff your whole life, but it's hard to get your brain to not print stuff and open files with Control P, but you can always change it to something else if you like. So, okay, so that's kind of all about opening files up. Okay, then at least when I'm looking at files, I mean, let's see. So sometimes to get more real estate, you can always hide this thing. Okay, and so you can always take a piece of code and split it if you want. You can have multiple views. So I'm going to go back here. So if I'd like to compare between mains and different folders, okay, so you can have split, and I'm sure you can split it as many times as you want, but that's also often quite handy to use the split view.
You can also split down, view.
Right.
Like if you want, like if it's really long, you want two things, you go view, split down.
Where? Okay, here, before I forget, this is a great example. Okay, and I don't have it in my outline. F1, pretty much every single command that you can do in VS Code. I'm sure it's in a menu somewhere, but if you can't remember where it is, you can just type F1, and like, even for silly things like copy or paste, like everything's here, okay? So yeah, split down, I can't remember, but it's under view, split down. So I can just press F1 for help and start typing that, and there. And split down, okay? So I often use F1 to find commands I can't remember where they live in the menu, okay? So I never go into the menu. I don't know, that's why I don't know where anything lives in there. I just pretty much use F1 and type a few characters of what I want to do. So other ones, let's see, do I have a markdown file? Okay, here we go. Okay, so you notice depending on different files that I open, there'll be some other stuff over here. So one of this says open preview to the side, okay? Okay, and so this is nice when VS Code is really good at dealing with Markdown, okay? It will basically automatically render it on the side as you scroll. And I mean, if I make changes, it's just live as you're looking at it, okay? So that's really nice for Markdown. I assume there's other things you can preview as well. Sometimes if I'm creating PDFs, I'll have PDFs over on the side and things like that. Okay, so let's see. So other things, kind of my next little area is working with code. So if I think a lot of this stuff will be reviewed, but so some things, so you can see if I mouse over things like constants, okay, it knows where it came from and it can go and find that for me, even if it's in a different file, okay? It's pretty smart. Okay. So there's always the usual autocomplete, so I can press Control space. And so even though this is in a different file, this function, it knows I've included the header up above here, okay. And I can pick something, and when I open the parentheses, it'll even tell me what all the function arguments are, okay. So if it's not doing this for you, then something's set up wrong. Maybe you're missing the C extension, which isn't there out of the box. You have to install that one. Okay, but we'll look at extensions in a minute. So, okay, so at any time while I'm typing, I can again control space is what I press to get that, or if I'm in function arguments, control shift space brings the parameter list back up. So, okay, so if it's gone, I can always get it back. So. Okay, so other things that are nice, if I right click on code, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go through all of it, but the C++ plugin is kind of Microsoft's bread and butter, and their Python one is really good too. But some things I can do, okay? The most simple at the top is I can go to it with F12. Okay, so I can click here, press F12 on my computer, and it will take me to this. Okay, it'll take me to the function. Now you say, oh, where does uint16 come from? Well, I can press F12 and it'll take me there too. Okay, now I could jump again. Let's see, let's go jump into this header file. Okay, and now I'm in like system library header files. Okay, and to find my way back, it leaves like breadcrumbs. Okay, you just can peel it off and go back. And I use control and a left arrow to jump back. Okay, I can actually hit control and right arrow to dive in again where I just went to. Okay, so I can kind of go back and forth in the stuff I was looking at by using the arrow keys. But sometimes I just mash the left arrow a bunch to kind of get back to where I started before I was jumping places. Okay, but I would say I use that all the time. Okay, then some of these I don't use as often, but if you have it set up properly, well, one thing, okay, like rename, it's not just going to rename it here. If I rename a function, it's going to go rename the actual function and all the places that call it. Okay, so it's a little bit fancier than just actually changing the text yourself. Okay, so let's see, what else can I do? Where is, oh, there you go, find all references, okay? I can go look everywhere in my code that refers to display fill screen, okay? And that will include where it's declared and include places that I call it, okay? If I go to a function, I think I can say, I thought there was like a call hierarchy or something, but maybe I'm thinking of a different language or tool. So, okay. But there's a lot you can do beyond just using it as a text editor. Okay. Let's see. You'll see that it knows this is C code and it's highlighted it as C code. And the reason for that is down here. We can kind of talk about all these things in a bit, but if we go over here, this one here says I can pick the language, okay? So right now it's on auto detect. It knows that because I've named it .c, it's going to be a C file. But maybe I say, oh no, I want you to treat this as F#. Okay. Okay, so you can change that there if you want. Questions? Keep going. I know it's kind of just like a fire hose of tips here, but hopefully it'll save you time in the future. Okay, so let's see what else is going on here. Okay, so we've kind of just been looking at the code. I'll take you around the rest of it here. So, so we have our main file explorer. There's a search here. Okay, so okay, if I search here, it's going to search in all the files in this workspace that I have open. Okay, and And you can exclude file, include, exclude, do fancier things, but it's still kind of limited. I encourage you to, if you didn't go all the way through the Linux tutorial, I think there's some stuff in there about doing fancier finds and things like that from the command line. And often I end up doing that. Okay, so there's the Git integrations that we looked at when we talked about Git. There's the debugger that I'll go over in a bit. And then what else do we have? Basically extensions. So let's see, it's coming up here, my list of things to talk about. References. Oh, because I asked it to find the references. This new one. Go away. Okay. Okay, so let's see. And then down, I closed the thing down here, but there was a bar. Here we go. Okay, so if you want, I often use the terminal down here, which again, if you can't remember the shortcut to get the terminal, you can go up to terminal and say new terminal, or you can press F1. Oops. You can press F1 and start typing terminal, and it'll say, hey, terminal. New terminal. Okay. So down in the terminals, you can have multiple terminals. Okay, so I've got 2 of them open right now. Okay, so I have this on here. Another one. Okay, you can split them here. Okay, so now in number 1, I have 2 bashes. I want 3. Okay, and you can always trash them. It's going to trash whichever one has focus. So if I want to get rid of the middle one, I click in it and trash it, and that one's gone. Okay. So sometimes if I'm doing stuff in 2 different directories, one where I'm building and running, sometimes I'll have 2 terminals going. It works quite nicely. So. Then other stuff like your program output shows up here, or other things that kind of depends on what you're working on. Usually I'm just using terminal here. Okay, so next is out of the box, VS Code has a lot of the stuff I've showed you, but not all of it. A lot of stuff comes through extensions. So I've got, there we go. So if I open this up, it tells me what extensions I have here. And so let's see, I've got stuff for doing Linux drivers, Tickle, so language stuff, so C, C++, all sorts of things. So maybe I'm in 220 and I would like syntax highlighting for Verilog, okay? So I search Verilog and, okay, and I can, and to install an extension, I guess this looks a little weird. I have to go back and say, I'm doing this on my Windows machine, but for those of you using Windows, if you're familiar, I'm actually not accessing my Windows file system here. I'm actually in my Ubuntu subsystem, which is essentially a virtual machine you're running inside. So I actually kind of am on a remote computer, but the remote is just my same computer. So what it's telling me here, it says, hey, did you want to install that in the remote one you're connected to, because it's actually only installed in my laptop version. But anyway, you can always just click the blue button to install it. And it usually just takes a few seconds. And now I would have Verilog language support. Okay, and it could syntax highlight Verilog. So, okay, so if I search for an extension, one thing to keep in mind is these are not extensions like, they're not all created by Microsoft, okay? If I search for C, C++, I can find, yeah, this one is created by Microsoft, but these are just open source extensions that anyone can make. You could go make one if you want. And if you do the right things and put it in the right place, it'll show up here in the marketplace. So if I search for Verilog, I mean, how do you know which one you want?
Yep. Maybe.
Pardon?
Read about it, click on it, read the information that they give you.
Yeah, so usually they give you like a little snippet here. And then as I scroll down, maybe this isn't the one for me. Yeah, so that is the first thing I look at is this number here. It says 208,000 people have downloaded this. So what's also tricky is a lot of these are open source and people can fork them. So they can look very similar to another one, but it's not really one that's maintained and people are using. Just someone decided to make a fork of it and change one thing. So the downloads really shows you, is this kind of the popular extension for this? Okay, so in this case, I get the one that has 200,000 downloads. I'm surprised there's that many people in the world doing Verilog, but I guess so. Okay. So, yeah, and I usually kind of just ignore the ones that have very small amounts. So, I mean, there's a star rating too that is helpful. So, whatever, same as any, we all use app stores. We know how it goes. Look for the ones that lots of people use that are rated well. So, yeah.
Occasionally there'll be ones that tie in with another plugin as well, like they extend an extension sort of thing. Like for example, like the one that's basically connected to template that you can want to use management. I have another one that you can add that also has a support plugin and input and stuff. So sometimes there's one that have another.
Okay, so that's good to know that they can connect together, build off of each other. So let's see. So what else? What am I missing here? What should we talk about with extensions? I'm ready to move on to something else. So what am I missing here? Yeah.
Is there any extensions that you would recommend?
Any that I would recommend? Let's see. I actually don't use that many of them. So I guess I can show you one. One that I would recommend is this remote SSH one. It's made by Microsoft, okay? And what it does is it adds this green button down here, okay? And so the green button, I'm gonna open a new window so I don't lose this one. So the green button actually lets me run a VS Code server on another machine and work on everything locally where I'm sitting, but the actual files are somewhere else. So it does it all through SSH. And so the same plugin can be used to connect to my WSL VM, but also through SSH. So if I do this, here's some different machines I connect into, okay. So SSH0 is in my office. It's just what I call that one. And now you'll see it's gonna install the server and I'm actually on that machine, even though this is running locally. So if I do open folder, this is actually the folders on that machine, okay? And what's neat is when I open that up, you'll kind of see it's gonna connect. Okay, and if I open up a terminal, this is a terminal on that machine. Okay, it's not running on my local machine. Yeah.
Can you explain how when you do the SSH with that GUI thing that sometimes it can lead to issues if you don't do just with your IP?
Oh, let's see. That's really pretty isolated. It's just, I know you ran into that. That really only my students, I think, will run into that. so I have like my machines here on campus have a network name, so I can connect to them by name. But for some reason, the network name doesn't work when my Windows machine's connected to VPN, but it's pretty isolated. And then I have to use the IP address. So that's the one I use most, that extension, but then kind of any language I'm using, I use that one a lot. I have a spell checker. I use this spell checker one that works pretty well. So. Yeah, that's a good point. So I don't know if I have a good example here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I did update some things on my computer, so I'm missing stuff. It says, hey, you're using Python, you should come try our PyLance extension. This one's made by Microsoft, so the message looks a little different than usual, but you can say, yeah, sure, and then kind of, let's see, then I'll click install, and so it'll give nice suggestions often, which is helpful. So. Anything else on extensions? Sometimes, oh, okay, sometimes you have to reload. Sure, we'll reload the window. And it takes a minute for everything to kick in. So, okay, yeah.
What kind of spell checker do you use?
Oh, I use it more for writing papers than for coding, but sometimes it's pretty smart. Like it won't like underline stuff here, but if I don't know, maybe, oh, it's probably not even installed. That's probably what's going on. Because again, I kind of just, oops, I'm not in the extensions. I use this one. And so do 2.5 million other people. So called, I don't know, code spell checker. So let's see if it would. I don't know, not a good demo. I don't actually use it in code too much. I use it for writing documents. So maybe I've told it to stop checking C files. I can't remember. Okay, so next I plan to talk about settings, where all the stuff I've set up, where have I done that? So I found settings can be one of the most confusing things when you use code, at least it was for me. Okay. All right, so who can tell me how do I open settings? Someone. I spent like 5 minutes looking at all the menus, show you where it lived in the menu. Apparently it's down there. I don't know. I press F1 and type settings. So, pardon?
It wasn't section under files.
Well, I know it's down here. I can go to settings, but was it somewhere else over here, you mean? File?
The file thing. Open up the file browser there.
There it is. Preferences.
Preferences? Okay. There we go. Okay. So there's other stuff you can do in here, like changing your key maps and stuff like that. And right, we can get to settings that way. But usually I go this way because, let's see. Do I not have a workspace? Oh, I do. Maybe there's no menu thing for that, but okay. So let's talk about it. Let's open settings. Okay, so it says, hey, would you like to open the settings or would you like to open the settings JSON file? Okay. So let's start here. We're gonna go to settings, okay. And so in here is basically all of the settings imaginable, okay. There are a lot. I'm just in the text editor, okay. You can see the scroll bar on the side is not moving very fast. Okay. Okay, there's a lot. So there's settings for different things, all sorts of stuff. And then every single one of my extensions down here, one for different languages and for different extensions I have, they also have their own set of settings here, okay? This is not often where I work because it's kind of overwhelming. where I usually work is in the JSON. Okay, and I could go back and hit the JSON menu, or this little thing at the top says, hey, open it in JSON view. So in JSON view, it's all in text. And so what you should remember here is, well, one, if you Google, how do I change the setting in VS Code, 80% of the time, someone's just going to give you a little snippet like this that to put in your settings file, okay? And so the way this works is the JSON file, my JSON file is pretty short. Well, okay, I've added stuff, but compared to the other one that had like thousands of pages, basically the other one shows you every setting. This one only shows you places where I've overridden the defaults, okay? If I go over there and change something and then come back here, I'll see the setting changed here, okay? They always reflect each other, okay? But I like this one because this just shows me non-default things. And I don't know, the programmer in me likes looking at this better than like trying to scroll through that and find things, okay? Yeah, so over here, I could find like, what do I have here? Like format on save. Can I find it? Maybe C++. I don't know. I have a trouble finding stuff, but you're right. The search is useful, okay? So you can do it either way. You can do it in JSON. And so if we look at some of the settings I have, okay? These one with the square brackets. These are settings for different languages. Yeah.
So if you don't change it to the defaults, what would be in the JSON?
Nothing. If you install VS Code and say open settings JSON, it'll just be an empty file. So yeah, for any C++ or C files, whenever I save them, I ask it to auto format it, okay? So if you're in my 330 class, I tell you, hey, if you save it, it should auto format it. Why? Because, well, that's kind of tricky. I mean, I haven't gone through and changed everyone's settings on their computer. But if we go back here, you'll notice there's settings for user settings and there's workspace settings. Okay, so in my VS Code folder, I can drop a settings in here and it will override any settings that I personally have tied to my installation, okay? And even beyond that, you'll see when I was in settings, there's settings on my computer and then there's settings on the remote machine and then there's settings on the workspace, which have the highest priority. Okay, so when I distribute this repository to my 330 students, I tell them, hey, please open it in folder view, because then VS Code's gonna read these settings that I've put there. Things like format on save, whenever you save your C or C++ files, run the formatter, okay? There's not much in there, but it's really useful. If you're collaborating on a project together, maybe there are some good settings that you want in there, okay? Other settings I have, I don't know, some projects I'm working on a research paper, I turn like word wrapping on or off or something. So yeah, so that's why it's a little bit confusing, is there's settings in different places, so, okay. Then beyond that, you can go down here and, oh, maybe I haven't turned it on yet on this computer. You can turn on settings sync. So if you use multiple computers like I do, you can keep all your settings synced and it'll essentially sync up that JSON across your different computers. So you get to see now setting it up because I haven't done it on this computer. It says, hey, what would you like to sync up? Okay, it's like settings, keyboard shortcuts, my extensions, okay? And then I have to sign in. It says, hey, would you like to sign in using your GitHub or Microsoft? Okay, so. Oh, uh-oh, there's conflicts. Oh, I'll just trust that whatever I had online is the correct one. So. Okay, so I use that generally. I don't know, there's pros and cons. I mean, I like having all my packages synced up, but at the same time, There's some extensions on some computers that I might not want on the others. And I think there's some setting you can do to mess with that. Say, hey, don't include this in my settings sync or something. Okay, so yeah, so some of these are settings for like Git and Python settings, and then other ones are for like my LaTeX plugin and my spell checker. These are words that I want it to ignore and things like that. So all of those just end up here in the settings. Okay, so I'm getting to the end here. I only have one or two more things. Any questions on the settings or keep going? Okay, well, so a big part of VS Code is it's supposed to be a debugger as well. Okay, it's supposed to help you with debugging your code. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, and so the way I do debugging is I go to this debug tab, okay? And it says, hey, you don't have any like debugging configurations set up yet. Would you like to create a new one? So I'm gonna say, yeah, create a launch.json for me. Any guess where that JSON is gonna get stored? In your VS Code folder, okay, along with the other JSONs. So it says, hey, you know, what environment are you in? Okay, I'm gonna use a GDB debugger, okay. Uh-oh, what's going on here? This is bogus, this is not what I want. Let's try, maybe I clicked the wrong thing. Uh-oh. No, maybe this is what I want. I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe this is looking a little better. I had just tried it before I came, but then I deleted the file. Now, okay. I don't know why this button is floating down here, but that is the button I want. This is new. It's usually up there on the left, but okay. So there are lots of different debugging things you could do. You could debug C files, you could debug Python, you can debug, I don't know, apparently Chrome, lots of different things. Okay, as you add new plugins, this list will get much larger. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a C program. So it basically adds this configuration here. Now, come on, why doesn't this look different? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. This is usually what it looks like, more like this. Okay. So let's see what this looks like here. There's a name. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to debug lab 1. So I'm just going to call this name lab 1, and you'll see now up here in my different things, I have lab 1 and apparently some old lab 5 with a typo, but I'm not sure where it's getting that from. Oops. Okay. So that says, hey, enter your program name. Okay. For example, if you have something in your workspace, workspace/a.out. Okay. So there's kind of these like built-in variables that you have to just know about. And they're pretty helpful in that they tell you about them, but you can, there's lots of documentation. But anyway, for 330, I know that it's going to end up living here, my executable. If I wanted to provide arguments, like if you're to run your execute at the command line and provide arguments, you could put those in here. And then it says, hey, what's the current working directory? It's going to pretend to run this. Well, it is going to run it like I ran it from being in my workspace folder. Maybe I want to run it from the build folder or something, okay? All right, so that's it. Over here, I've put a breakpoint in, okay? And now I can click run, and it's gonna work. If I'm lucky. Okay, and so that now I've got my little 330 emulator here, which doesn't show much till I step over this, but I can step through here. I can kind of look at the 330 and step through. So, I mean, it's not really a class about debugging right now, but that's how you're going to set things up, is through that JSON file. Okay, and so I can stop, and there's things like the call stack and variables and lots of stuff if you've debugged C before. So, okay, and if I wanted to add another one, I could just come up here and say add configuration. And I guess there's this giant blue button that kind of floats around here. So, but if you wanted to execute, or if you wanted to debug, excuse me, lots of different executables and remember different arguments you provided and things like that, I mean, you can make this really slick and have lots of different configurations. And this is something you might want to commit into your project and share with other people in your group, so they don't have to spend time setting it up and things like that. So it can be quite helpful for debugging. Okay, so let's see, what do I have? Let's see, in my VS Code folder, I've showed you most things. There's, what I haven't showed you is have an extensions.json. And so these are recommendations. I don't know what else you can put in this file, but when I put this in, these are recommended packages, so that when my students go and open this up in 330, this cool little pop-up comes up and says, hey, we have recommended extensions for this workspace. Do you want to install them? Okay. So, or if this is something you're sharing with others, or maybe, I mean, it's kind of a neat little feature that I like to have. So we went over the launch, we went over the settings, and the last thing here is tasks. So in the tasks, you can essentially make tasks that do whatever you want, okay? I wish I could tell you all the different things you can do, but I haven't used them for that many things. But you'll see I have a couple tasks here, okay? Particularly two of them, one called CMake and one called make. And they are both type shell. So they basically, it's just a short form to go run a shell command. And so up in F1, again, I can say, hey, run task. Okay, and it'll say, hey, which task would you like to run? Make or CMake, or you can go start making some new tasks, I guess. Okay. And so make, then it will, okay, you see it will go to this working directory. Sorry, I did the make one. It'll go to that working directory and it'll run make-j4. This one's a little fancier. It says this is actually a build task. So this is special because now I've actually configured the default build behavior for this workspace. So, so if I just say run build task, which is Control-Shift-B, at any time in my project, I can just Control-Shift-B and it will build my code, okay? And so even though I'm not using their built-in compiler, I've really just hooked into running like a shell command with the like build shortcut, okay? So if you like building that, I don't often use it actually. I usually just come down to my terminal and type make or hit the up arrow and hit make again. So, but it's there and you can make kind of different tasks to run. And I don't know, you could go learn more about it, come back and tell me about some interesting ones. I don't know what else there is. So. That I am like at the end of my list. The last thing I'll show you, which is, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. There's a GitHub extension, okay? And so if you use the GitHub extension. Yeah, sorry, again, like I said, I haven't set things up here yet. Okay, it was just signing me into GitHub. There's stuff you can do here, like you can say you can see your issues, you can see pull requests. Sorry, this is not the most exciting repository right now. It's all cleaned up. But you could actually like create new pull requests here without even ever going to GitHub. Okay, so it's okay. It's new. It's a little flaky. It works pretty well. Sometimes I use it. So, but if you want to try it out. That's almost everything I know about VS Code. What else am I missing that we should talk about?
You use the outline or timeline at the bottom left.
Yeah, I don't know what timeline is. I've never noticed it till you just said it. Okay, let me get back to, I got too many things open. I'm too lazy to close them. So I'm just gonna Control P back to main. Get back to the file I have open. Okay. So yeah, outline, I do use it sometimes. Usually if it's new code that I'm not familiar with. Okay, it'll show me an outline, like different functions and things like that. That's pretty good. Timeline, I don't know. Anybody know what that is? Timeline, it looks like I'm looking at Git history, Git log. I've never used that, but, oh, like, what could I like? Oh, cool. I could see it like diffed with older versions. Look up a button, that's kind of cool. Diffs mine with back with one of these commits. That's pretty cool.
You're supposed to be using it locally and you're trying to figure out like what you need to really do code.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't go over the Git things because I showed them before, but I often come over here and I look at what I've changed, and I often hit this button to roll it back. And then I was sitting here thinking, oh, I showed you guys that last week, but I didn't put a disclaimer on it. Careful when you click that button. It's telling it to throw away your code changes that you've made. So I like pressing that button a lot to throw things away, but I have once or twice thrown away something I shouldn't have. And then maybe you can Control Z, maybe you can't, I can't remember. So, all right, anything else? Yeah.
For the activity after this meeting, are we going to have a C program to debug?
Oh yeah, I didn't put much thought into it, to be honest, and I didn't come up with any great activities for you to do. I think you're right. Right now it says debug a C program. So if you'd like to make a C program and launch the debugger, I think that would be a good exercise, because that's just about the most complicated part of what I showed you. Everything else is kind of just navigating menus. So I encourage you to try that out. Be comfortable with it, because if you have to debug some difficult bug that printf isn't quite cutting it for you and you need to step through a debugger, it's nice to have that skill in your tool belt. So I will show you one more thing that I forgot about. Okay, this one, let's see. Try to get to like the actual package place. Okay, so this one's pretty cool in that you can set up, let's see if I can make the video bigger. It's not really a video. This is an extension that someone we work with at Google pointed us to, and I have never tried it out yet, but it still seems kind of cool. So they basically have different ways to visualize data that you are looking at. So if you've used a debugger before and you say, I want to watch this variable, as you step through your code, you can see in text the value changing. But with this extension, there's cooler ways to display that than just looking at the value. You can do it in a chart, you can do it in a graph. Oh, we're getting really far here. And it's like not a video I can click or do anything with. It's a GIF. So there, I mean, it's actually visualizing like sorting a list. So I thought that's pretty cool. Let's see. There was a better video that I stumbled upon, but now I'm not finding it. Come on. So you can do, let's see, this isn't where I was, but trees, grids, vectored graphics, what? Oh, okay. Oh, here we go, that's better. So you could you could do this, you could watch variables, and as you step through your execution, it would like graph them or 3D plot them or things like that. So I can't say I've personally used it, but it seems, here's a sample of just how much you could do with different extensions that you can. So that was kind of neat. This is called Debug Visualizer. So it only has 15 reviews, but it does have 42,000 installs. So I don't know. People like me that don't bother leaving reviews.
Is that for any language?
I guess, because I think like
C, Python, or?
I think so, because in the debugger, it's kind of a common thing. Once you're watching things, the watcher looks the same.
Any language.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a neat idea. So, yeah. All right. Well, then let's finish here, and I think I guess I'm back Wednesday. We're talking about make, and then Dr. Mangelson's talking about CMake on Friday. So that's it.